So on today's show, we talked to Carl Kleimann, and we learned a lot about his journey from building one company and exiting and rolling equity to rolling equity again, to rolling it again, and to starting another company and being success. But, Casey, what were your key takeaways on Carl's episode today?
Yeah, you meet people and you get a chance to learn a little bit about their backgrounds. And what you realize about leadership is people either have that leadership, they've learned the leadership to be able to guide and make things happen, right? And Carl's what I would call one of those people that's an infectious leader, right? You get around him, you want to rise to the occasion. And so that leadership and that journey, the story matches somebody that just has that servant leadership mentality.
Yeah. That was kind of the takeaway that I got, was that he's just a good guy, a good soul, and, cared about his customers, cared about his team members, and brought that to the table for the private equity guys. And I think he probably humanized a lot of this stuff too.
Oh,
and it was incredible just to kind of see that, the longevity that he lasted within that private equity space too.
And I'd also say, there's also that constant learning mentality, right?
Yeah.
Because what we do is hard. There's nothing easy about starting a business, having employees, but instead of looking at it going, why is this happening to me? It's more like, what can I do with this? How do I get better from it? And so to say, hey, I've stayed on and I'm going to roll in my equity and then I'm going to learn, man, you got a big check. Most people's ego's like, shoot, man, I'm out the door.
Yeah.
I'm going to the beach.
Yep.
And instead it's like, hey, I want to learn and become better. And then that skill set takes you to another opportunity that scales to 250 million.
Yeah. So this is an incredible episode. I want you guys to stay in tuned to it and look forward to the next one.
Let's go. Hey there, this is Casey with the M&A Launchpad Podcast. I want to let you know about October 25th. Put it on your calendar. This is a do not miss one-day event. There's going to be incredible headliners, but really at the end of the day, you're going to get a chance to talk to people that have made acquisitions, learn from some of the challenges that they've made, because this is definitely a challenging process. But more importantly, there's going to be people there that can help you and support you along the way, from great vendors, quality of earnings, how to run the due diligence process, and how do I get financed? How do I raise capital? How do I structure all of these things? October 25th in Chicago, we're going to be gathering. It's going to be hundreds of people that are all focused, like-minded people. And man, everyone that's come has given us incredible feedback. So mark your calendar, October 25th in Chicago. We look forward to seeing you. Hey, Carl, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Great to be with you.
Yeah, it's just, we've known each other for so long, and I've gotten to watch all of the things you've done and, getting to talk about it, and just been a great mentor. And so we've had to have you on the show and talk a little bit about some cool things.
Yeah, I think I'm really, really excited about today's show for our listeners. I mean, I know the company that Carl's currently at. I know the family behind it, and I'd love to hear that story too. But I think it's nice to. I think a lot of our the people that we have on as guests are showing us different parts of this journey, and I think Carl's part of the journey is what does that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow look like, right? And and what were all the challenges, trials, and tribulations to get to that pot of gold? And I think that's important for people to keep in the back of their mind as on their vision board, or whatever goals are going to put up there. That ultimately, if you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to run these companies, right, you need to have an exit strategy, right? And what does that exit strategy look like? And so, really, really excited to kind of dive in with Carl today and kind of talk about what that looks like.
Carl, so give us just a snapshot about your background, and we'll start beating you up with questions here.
I kind of got off to an early start with the entrepreneurial bug. So in high school, I was a Texaco. I had a Texaco station, one in Tomball, and then one in Magnolia, along with my stepbrother, Brent Kennedy. And so kind of got early exposure to what it feels like to have to, make payroll and deal with inventory and deal with employees and things of that nature. Kind of got the bug. And then when I went to college, I really did focus on college, got out of that business, focused on school. And when I got out, I went to work for ADP, Automatic Data Processing. Spent about 4 years there, which was very valuable. Worked with some great folks, great company, learned a lot, created a lot of connections there, and then went on to get into the PEO, Professional Employer Organization business, which is how I met you. spent over 25 years in that industry. Exited that industry. 2014, Rusty Moffitt and I started this business, Moffitt Services, and here we are.
So, Carl, let's go back to the PEO conversation, because I personally think that it was one of the best experiences of my entrepreneurial career was going and selling PEO services. Not only did I get a chance to sell to C-suite, but it's really helped me focus on a lot of the administrative stuff that happens in a company where you don't really think about, right? Processing payroll and all those things. So just kind of in your back, 25 years of doing the industry, and it was your first exit, right? Your first company that you were a part of an exit, and it's a great story. Talk just real quick about why you think PEO is important for the small business world and what you saw in it, and then tell us about the journey that you had from Odyssey all the way through CoAdvantage.
Yeah, well, first, to your point, it is an absolutely great lens to the business world, right? What I enjoyed most about that business, and it was similar at ADP, is that we were industry agnostic. We got to work with all types and sizes of business, all industries. I was in it long enough to go through, economic cycles, and you learn a lot more than just about payroll and HR and employee benefits. You learn a lot about the businesses that you're working with. I had the great fortune of working with thousands of businesses in my PEO career. So absolutely love that. Now, to your question of why are PEOs important to small businesses, I guess this is one where you can never really take the hat off, right? When Rusty and I started Moffitt, we started with a PEO, right? And the reason that we did, and the reason it's important, is when you're running a small business, and we all define small businesses differently, but let's just put it this way: if you have less than 100 employees, you probably don't have a lot of depth of expertise around things like employment regulations, how to combat an unemployment claim, how to minimize or mitigate liability for violations, discriminatory actions. But on the flip side of that, you probably don't have a depth of skill around how to recruit talent. And by the way, that game has evolved tremendously, even in the years since I've been out of the industry, right? I've been out of the industry now for a little over 10 years. And so I think PEOs, at least what we tried to do at Odyssey and then CoAdvantage, is to bring that expertise, which translates into competitive advantage to smaller companies that would not have otherwise had that, whether it was more expertise, better recruiting, better employee benefits, more affordable employee benefits, retirement plans, things that help level the playing field for the smaller companies competing against the larger folks.
One of those big selling points of the PEO at that point was also better insurance, health insurance. And I think that world is not slowly, I think that world is gone. I think health insurance is just out of whack and crazy. But again, it's these things that, and I kind of get into the PEO conversation because it feeds into your business journey, right? Because when you're in the back office, you're talking to these business owners, why do they need our services? All of a sudden you start realizing that all of these companies have the same problems, right? They may not be having the same problems at the same time, right? But they have them. And like we use a PEO for our H&M plating company. And, we had somebody that we had a worker fall, something fell on top of them and they sued us.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And we didn't do anything. We sent it over to our EPLI. They managed it. They handled it. They settled it. We didn't even have to worry about it. But if I wouldn't have had that, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely one of those things that and you kind of hit on it, Carl, where as you're starting off, it's good to have somebody in your backcourt that you can scale with until you get to a point where you can bring some of those things in-house. But one of the other things I always thought was interesting about the PEO is that you guys when you're selling it, you're in front of the business owners. And so to kind of tie that thread for our listeners too, right? Great contacts for people that are searching for business owners and contacts to business owners, and
100%.
And to tie it back to
that's how we found H&M.
That's how we found H&M, which was Equity Launchpad's first acquisition, was through a PEO provider and a business owner,
a broker.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
And so like the point is like these people are talking to C-suite, and to the business owners themselves. They're going to know, what is their journey like? Are they looking to sell? Are they not looking to sell? Are they looking to expand potentially? And so I think, if you're a listener to this podcast, I think it's important to put those people on your list of lawyers, CPAs, the financial advisors that
PEOs,
that work with the business owners, but also PEOs.
Yeah, and some of the guys, Carl, that we've worked with on the sales side, I mean, they're super sharp. I mean, these are not your everyday, ordinary salespeople. Most of the PEO salespeople that I have run across, these are efficient business people. They understand how business
Absolutely.
works, right?
Very sharp.
Yeah. Case in point, Ben, he was a PEO sales rep, so
that's true. That's very true. He's going to pat himself on the back. I love it.
Hey, I'm giving credit to a lot of the guys I worked with because they're impressive.
No, and obviously we've worked with them too, and in my case, several different businesses, and they're very, very sharp, right? And so, they're in a good position to have that knowledge of the business and the business owner himself, right, or herself.
So let's take that snapshot on that, and let's talk about the evolution of what happened to you. You started Odyssey, and then to exiting 25 years later, and then being a part of a group that you had multiple exits inside of. I think that is a very good conversation for people to think about, because you started Odyssey, and you didn't buy it, you started it. And that was just you went to business owner to business owner to business owner, right? And you scoured it, and then you built it over time. And the beautiful part of that business is it's recurring revenue, right? So those are some of those things that make it very sticky, and it's hard to move if you do your job right. So talk a little bit about Odyssey to Co-Advantage and the exit and all the fun stuff.
Sure. I'm actually going to go one step further back. So after, over 4 years at ADP, I left there to actually join a PEO out of the Woodlands called Contract Employment Systems. Worked there for a short time, and one of my coworkers at ADP, a guy named Scott Davis, and I decided that we wanted to start a PEO. I believe it was in October of 1990 when we officially started. And I understand at this point, the industry was just beginning. Administaff, for those of you who know now, Insperity, really got their start in the mid 80s. And so, we were only about 5 years in. Now, the relevance of that is that this was a brand new industry, and one where there was no regulatory frameworks. So up until that point, an employer-employee relationship was, I'm the employer, you're the employee, right? Now enter a three-pronged relationship where you have the employer who's running the business, you have this PEO who's the employer of record for tax and benefit purposes, and the employee. The labor laws weren't written that way, right? And so the relevance of that is, after Scott and I got started, we got off to a pretty quick start. Within just a couple of years, we had a few thousand employees in our PEO group, which back then was a reasonable size. And then the industry hit a bit of a brick wall. We got, as an industry, we got into a legal dispute with the State Board of Insurance over whether we had the right as an industry to buy workers' compensation insurance. And so that was an interesting time, and it was painful at the time because most of us as PEOs saw business dwindle. At a minimum, we saw a big slowdown in capturing new customers because nobody was real sure whether the industry would survive this or not. Ultimately, we did, but we went through a couple of mergers during that time, and one of those mergers was with Odyssey. So our company was called the Laxus Group. The Laxus Group and Odyssey merged in November 8th of 1993, I believe it was. David Williams and his sister Pat Fry, and we merged those companies and never looked back. And so fast forward to 2011, we had grown the business. We had about 10,000 what we call worksite employees or customer employees, about 400 customers, about $400 million in revenue. And we then sold that business to Madison Capital out of Chicago. That was kind of the first round of private equity.
Man. So, I mean, just that alone, why don't you tell us just for a second about dealing with the private equity for the first time?
Yeah. So what I will tell you is that from 1990 starting the business to 2011, I learned a lot. I think I learned a lot more in the, few years after that in working with the private equity firms. I certainly learned different things, and I value all of that learning. But in 2011, David and Pat were ready to retire. I was one that went with the business when Larry Geese at Madison Capital decided to buy us. Larry had already purchased 2 other PEOs, all within just the past year prior to acquiring his third, which was Odyssey. That was in September of 2011. Learned a tremendous amount, rolled part of my equity in with Madison Capital, and we sold that business 16 months later, December 31st, 2012, to Compass Investment Partners out of New York. Rolled part of my equity again, put my head back down with a larger group of folks, and we went and rolled up several other PEOs, and then sold that business years later to Morgan Stanley Private Equity. To your question about what I learned from private equity, a lot of lessons that I wouldn't have gotten as just an entrepreneur. We could talk more about those in a few minutes, but.
Well, no, I mean, I was going to say, what's the good and what's the bad, right? Because I think that's, if you're an entrepreneur that's been thinking about this and understanding, like, what's my exit look like? It's, on the smaller side, it's to somebody that's just looking to buy a company. But if you're a little bit bigger, right, call it, probably anywhere 2 to 5 million in EBITDA and up, you're probably selling to a private equity firm. So what was the good? Give me maybe 2 examples of good and 2 examples of bad. Just so people are kind of aware, at least of your situation. Obviously, everybody's situation will be unique. Things that you weren't aware of when you got into this journey.
Yeah. So regarding the good, I would say for one, Ben, none of us are experts at everything. And I would say one of the things I always cherished about my partnership with David and Pat and other members of their family that I work closely with, Mark Turner, is that, we all have complementary skills. And that's important in a business. What I found with particularly the private equity folks that I worked with is that they really brought, a lot of depth and complementary things that as a small business person, I wasn't quite as proficient with, particularly around, financial, engineering the financial aspects of, we grew Co-Advantage to almost $1 billion business. And that takes a different skill set, right? And I didn't have that experience coming out of this more entrepreneurial environment. And that served me well, in years after that, right? The second thing is a broader team. So it's not just the experience, but, really getting to work with very kind of more depth of experience in skills. By the time, we had acquired our 6th or 7th company, we had a senior leadership team. There were 13 of us on that team, led by a guy named Mike Maseda, a Harvard.
Impressive guy.
Yeah, impressive guy. Casey knows him. Very impressive. I learned a ton from Mike. I learned a ton from others that just had a more depth of experience in the individual areas. Guys like Wade Latham, who was our safety and risk manager. Guys like Chad Perotti, who was our sales leader. I could go on and on. I learned a ton from them.
Yeah, funny little side story though. So he was talking about Mike Maseda. So I worked for Carl right after he sold the Co-Advantage. So I was the one sales guy in Houston. Really, it was just me and Kurt Deffenbaugh and Mark, another guy. And, Carl had the office, but he didn't come in all the time. And so it was just us, and Kurt was our new sales manager. Anyways, I made it to club that year. And so I'm sitting there at a dinner with Mike Maseda and a couple of the guys. And, I'm pretty direct, right? It's not, I wasn't sugarcoating. He just says to me, he was like, so, hey, Casey, so is there, what do you think? Is there anything we can improve upon? And man, I just spent the next 10 minutes, just new guy to the whole thing, just laying it out. And this guy, Josh, who's one of their guys, he's kicking me on the table. He's like, dude, what are you doing? And I'm like, he asked me a question.
I thought I was supposed to be candid.
So all I got to say, Carl, is Glenda was absolutely embarrassed. And she was like, I wasn't rude. I just was candid. And Mike appreciated it, though, because we had a good dialogue. But it was just one of those funny stories where you just look and you go, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have gotten that deep at the dinner table. And it was right. Look, it was right at the time healthcare reform was happening, right?
Yes.
So you had Obamacare coming in, and you had a total shift. And so Carl headed up the entire. That was his thing. He took that whole. I mean, Carl, you really got into the healthcare reform side and made Co-Advantage a leader in that space around it. But it was a lot of stuff going on. So when you're talking about health benefits, right? Like all of a sudden you went from, being able to offer your clients a bulk kind of pricing and you could segment out the cost. Now you've got a flat rate per age banded rate. And so you're really not competitive anymore, right? You're selling so anyways, without getting deep, these were like some serious things going on, right? And Carl led that whole transition of healthcare reform. It was pretty impressive.
Love it. So, shifting over to the bad, right, Carl? And I don't want you to feel like you gotta disparage anybody, but just more so just maybe lessons learned or things that maybe you would have done differently. Now kind of looking back at in terms of the process and how it kind of went down. Can you maybe kind of expand on some of that?
Sure. And before I do, if I could, there's one more good that I would say, Ben, and that is, running a more of what I would have called a lifestyle business that the Williams family, myself, and others at part of the Odyssey team, we a lot of decisions we make out of what we're comfortable with. One of the things I learned is how to balance that a little bit better around just making more data-driven decisions and maybe a little less gut and a little more data. And I talked about that at your recent conference. Yep. That is a skill that I honed quite a bit working with the professionals that I worked with at the various private equity firms and the senior leadership team. So just wanted to throw that in.
Now I think they're a bunch of I think the one thing just to expand on what you said, right, is a lot of they're a lot of finance guys and gals, right, and they know their way around spreadsheets and they know how to do pro formas and projections and trends, and I think that they do use that quite a bit, and that's something that I think when you're talking to these business owners, again, I'm trying to thread a needle for our listeners. You need to realize, if you use too much of these terminologies with some of these business owners are going to think that you're talking down to them. So just be careful with that. But I think it's important to understand that that's where the world's going, right? Is modeling and understanding how to put these things together. There's a lot of financial engineering in terms of deal structure that I think the PE shops and some of the bigger kind of guys that come into this space, they know how to do that really, really well. They know how to solve business owners' problems and do it creatively and financially engineer it and put the capital stack together effectively so everybody wins. And I think that's why a lot of these guys are pretty successful.
And I would imagine, Carl, that data-driven part of your experience has now allowed you, when you guys work with Main Street, to be able to handle that transition too. Because I would imagine the language, how to run that side of it. So it wasn't like a total shock to the system when that occurred, right? So it's like you wouldn't have known that you got that from there to get you to right now. It's pretty incredible.
Yep. No, that's absolutely true, and I think a good segue into the bad. So I would say one of the bad is kind of coming into this in 2011. Not having had experience with private equity, you have a tendency to maybe not push back as hard, and we definitely maybe got a little too data driven there for a brief period where we, changed the way the business worked. Maybe we would make decisions around the way customer service works, or certain people who would, when you're meshing companies together, when you're trying to put 3 companies together and then 7 companies together and 9 companies together. Look, the reality is changes have to be made. Not everyone can be the head of sales or the head of customer service or even on the sales team. And we definitely made some mistakes around not identifying the value of certain people and certain processes. When we were trying to standardize things, we went at that a little bit too quick. In some cases, we underestimated the relationships that certain individuals had with certain customers, and we lost those. So while we thought we were saving $50,000 here, we lost $200,000 customer, relationship, right? Yep. So that's the bad. I would say, you have to iterate. You have to keep kind of learning from those things and not making those mistakes over. And I think what it taught me is kind of how to be a better partner with private equity, I think they respect when kind of when to push back and when to not push back on that kind of pure modeling. I think we also learn how to just get better at the kind of data, the quality of data that we use in those kind of analytics. So people decisions, we definitely made some mistakes. I would say another one that would be relevant for your audience would be we almost always overestimated the long-term longevity or interest that the sellers would have to be a part of our model. Most of the purchases that we made, most of the acquisitions we made were made with the same model that I came into, where you as the business owner were going to come in and play a role in this broader team. You're going to own a smaller piece of a bigger pie. It's going to trade at bigger multiples. We're going to make it more efficient. And all of that sounds good up until it doesn't, right? And when you take people who've been entrepreneurial all their life or for decades, and all of a sudden now you put them in a group of 12 with 12 other people where you're, sharing decisions, really, I was shocked at how few people made it through that. Honestly, at the end of, my reign after, the years I spent there, I was one of only 2 of the sellers that remained out of the 9 acquisitions in total that we had made, meaning 7 had fled, and they all fled within the first 12 months of their stint, right? So be conscious of that. If that entrepreneur that you're buying is really important to the business, you better either download as much of that information as you can, or you better build a model where they can kind of continue that more entrepreneurial spirit, because if not, you're going to hit a brick wall there most likely.
And yeah, I mean, we've learned that firsthand as well. So I mean, I think you need to realize that once that check has been stroked, right? Those people at least subconsciously are already kind of stepping back, right? And you need to find a role that scratches that entrepreneurial itches. I think what you're saying.
If you want to stay involved,
if you want them to stay involved, right? And so I was curious, Carl, that kind of leads to my next question for you. But what skill or what style do you feel like you had that allowed you to be one of those 2 of 9 that stayed around?
I'm going to cut you off on that. I can tell you exactly what it is, man. I don't know how you don't fall in love with Carl. Like, he's just an incredible human being. Like, he does not have a huge ego. He's there to support, and he's very good at what he does. But I think the humility that he brings, right, where he doesn't talk down to people, he's there to the relationship blossoms when you're around a leadership, right? Yeah. So anyways, sorry to cut you off, Carl, but I had to answer that one for you.
No, and that's probably it, right? I think the problem that you probably see as an entrepreneur is that everybody's a type A alpha, and they want to make all the decisions, and they don't want anybody countering them. And, and if you've built a company that for the last 20 or 30 years and you're the only boss, nobody ever told you elsewhere. Now you're on a committee, so I think that, people that are listening, like if you're a part of that on either the buy or the sales side, just understand that dynamic. And,
well, listen,
what's your thoughts, Carl? Was I right?
I don't know how I could top that answer unless we called my mom and patched her into this thing. I appreciate that. But the reality is, for me, is I wanted that experience. Like, I knew that I had, I knew I was short on skills in, kind of the higher end of the mid market, right? I, as an entrepreneur, I'd done it for a long time, felt like I had a good grasp, but I had something to learn, right? It's like paying tuition to go to college, right? It might not be the most fun sitting in the class, but you're there for a reason. And I really showed up every day with that in mind, that I'm going to learn something here that I'm going to take away with me, and I'm going to, reapply it somewhere else. And that worked out. Fortunately, being an equity player with the private equity guys, was enjoyable too, right? We were fortunate, we were blessed. We did create some great results, and when you're right alongside that, everybody's aligned from a financial standpoint. That was fun. It was rewarding, and I don't regret a day of it.
So that's a great segue to talk about all those skills and all that you did to just roll into Moffitt, right? So you leave Co-Advantage. Are you at the end where you also, I think it was, who was the last private equity that acquired it? Was it Jay?
It was Morgan Stanley Private Equity was the last one that acquired while I was still part of that team.
So then after that, you took some time and then you started another company. And so I bet you all those skills that you hustled in on paid off, right?
Yes, and I really didn't take any time. So what happened, just for a little background, so my family was in the fuel business, back in the 70s, my mom and stepdad. As I mentioned to you, I was a Texaco retailer in Tomball and Magnolia in the early 80s, very small scale. But some family friends of ours, the Moffitt family, were in a similar business to my mom and stepdad. Moffitt Oil, that company had been around since 1947. That family sold that business in 2011. They had kids working in the business. The kids signed 3-year non-competes. The parents signed 5-year non-competes. In 2014, when the youngest son, Rusty Moffitt, my partner, when his was up, he reached out to me one day and said, "What do you think about starting a fuel company? We'll call it Moffitt Services." And I said, "That sounds like a great idea." Now, the reality was I was still spending my time and energy with Co-Advantage at that point. So initially, I was really a financial partner. And so I injected some capital. Rusty injected some capital. We opened up shop right where his family business had been before, because Suncoast Resources had bought that business. It didn't need the name. And so anyway, off we went. I would say by 2016, I was really starting to have to spend a little bit of time in the business, with Rusty. The business needed both of us. And by 2017, especially when Hurricane Harvey hit, we have a disaster response component to our business. We were incredibly busy, and the business really kind of took off. And so that was, when we had sold to Morgan Stanley Private Equity. It was a good time for me to exit and redirect all of my efforts here to Moffitt Services. Here we are 11 years later. We got about 225 people on our team, about $250 million in revenue, and now I have Main Street Capital as recent minority partners. They own about 27% of our business now.
So let's unpack that. So okay, so you sold, you rolled, they sold again. Now you helped a startup with a family friend. You guys have built that up to an incredible revenue and headcount, and now you're taking on private equity again. What was kind of the impetus for that? What was the you kind of wanted another bite at the apple? Was there an exit that needed to happen? Can you kind of unpack that story a little bit for our listeners?
Yeah, I can. So one part I left out in 2016, when Rusty's dad, Roy Moffitt, when his non-compete was up, he was living in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, living the good life. Rusty and I talked him into coming and joining us, and he did. And he played a pivotal role with us for the next 8 years. After joining us, but he was ready to retire this year. He retired in March, and I would say one of the two driving forces with Main Street was to facilitate Roy's retirement, financially. The second is really to create a path, kind of long term, because I'll be the next to retire. By the way, Rusty's 39.
He's got a little bit of ways.
he's got a little ways, and it's really important to kind of keep the legacy business. Rusty has 5 kids, and as most fathers, I think at some point, he envisions maybe one of those might want to take the helm, like he had the opportunity to do, to kind of keep a family tradition going. So we felt like Main Street brought a unique opportunity because they are minority guys at heart, right? That's what they really do. They have about 85 companies in their portfolio, and many of them look very similar. I've met about half of them. And so we thought that they would be a good partner. I also think they bring the same kind of, opportunities to assist with the things that, private equity guys, even though they're publicly traded, I think of them like private equity. They're very smart. They're very data driven. They're very analytical, and I think they bring value when you look at the kind of long term horizon of this business. Particularly if we decide to start growing through acquisition, which we really have done very little of up to this point. We've made 2 very small acquisitions, asset acquisitions. But I think they would bring a tremendous value in that model.
That is beautiful, man.
Love it.
So great story. I will tell you, Carl, very much enjoy our friendship and you being here with us. It's going to be great. So we're going to jump, unless we have a couple more things you want to talk about. We could have you here for 5 hours, man. Let's jump into our rocket round and jump into it. Now, for our listeners, we always do the rocket round. This is where we ask our guests 3 questions. So, and I think very important questions. So, Carl, what do you like to do in your free time?
Well, for one, I have a bay house. My wife and we have a 10-year-old son, by the way. And so we like to fish. We like to hang out down in Matagorda. Rusty and his family have a house right next door, and Roy and his wife have a house about 3 doors down. So we do spend a fair amount of time on the coast doing those kind of things. With a 10-year-old, we have baseball and all kind of activities going on all the time. So filling free time never seems to be a challenge.
With the kiddos, it never is. I feel you on that. I got an 11-year-old daughter. So, all right. So most memorable moment in your business journey. I'm sure there's probably been some, but maybe sum it up to maybe the ultimate one.
Yeah.
Most memorable. So in 2011, when we were closing the deal with Madison Capital, I was having cold feet. I was rolling half of my equity into the business. So I'd worked at that point, 21 years building this equity in this business. And I remember sitting down with Larry Geese in our office right before the closing and just telling him, I just wasn't sure. Could I have that opportunity, maybe a month or so? We had been so busy focused on the closing, and he made a statement that I'll never forget. And he just, as nice as he could, he said, the answer is no, but he said, can you imagine like 2 years from now, I'm sitting in front of my board of directors and, something terrible's happened here. The business has failed. And this comes out about at the very last minute, like one of the owners, one of the sellers didn't want to invest his own money in this business. Like, how would that look on me? And honestly, I'm so glad he did that, because that was a turning point for me. I got over it pretty quick. I invested, and it's one of the best investments I've ever made, which gave me the opportunity to, make a couple more right after that. But that was a memorable moment, and it could have gone either way. If he would have said, "Okay, I understand, no problem," that would have looked a lot different for me.
Might have been a different path, right?
Yeah.
Love it.
All right, last question. What is your favorite tool or resource?
Experience. And one of the things I love about it is it evolves all the time. And it's not just kind of what you gain in terms of experience, but how you apply it. I find as I get older and get more experienced, I come at the same problems differently, and that's great. I would say the other is just kind of having done it, right? I've always prided myself on having done most of the jobs that people in my organizations are doing. I enjoy the details, and for me personally, it's served me well, but it's also rewarding. I enjoy rolling my sleeves up and getting involved.
Man,
Love it.
awesome. So, Carl, how can our listeners connect with you?
So find me on LinkedIn. Also, if they are curious about our business, we're at MoffittServices.com. By the way, we have a foundation called the Moffitt Legacy Foundation. We're doing work in Kerr County in assisting some of the folks affected there. If anyone wants to get involved in that, they can do that. Just go to Moffitt Services and you can link to the Legacy Foundation from there.
Love it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for what you're doing. That's really great.
No, it's an incredible podcast, Carl. I mean, obviously, wealth of experience. You know, you've been down the journey that a lot of, I think, entrepreneurs are.
We're all dreaming for it, man.
We're all dreaming for it.
I'm praying for the problem. And I can always call you. No, but listen, thank you for really being with us today. And we'll be back together soon.
Enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
Carl.
you, both. You bet. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the M&A Launchpad Podcast. If you've enjoyed today's podcast and would like to support us, please leave us a rating and a review after you listen. I'm Casey Minshew, and I look forward to talking with you next week.